Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our cabinet. First of all, I'd just like to welcome Councillor Richardson to his first ever cabinet, and also to thank Peter Gould for accepting the portfolio of assets and investments. Now, as I don't have much voice and it's probably not going to last, I've asked Councillor Brewster if he would mind chairing this session. Thank you.
Fine. Good afternoon, councillors, members of the public and officers, of course. Welcome to this cabinet meeting this afternoon on the 10th of February. Take first apologies for absence, if I can, please.
We have no apologies, Chair.
Thank you. And declaration of interest by councillors. Are there any? No? Thank you. Item 3 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of January 2020.
I'm happy to propose that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And a seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Lovely. And is it your wish that those are signed as a correct record? May I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. And then also to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of January 2020.
Yes, again, I'm happy to confirm those. Thank you.
Thank you. And a seconder, please, again.
And once again, happy to second, Chair.
And is it your wish that those minutes are signed as a correct record of that meeting, please? A show of hands. Thank you very much. Have we any petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme?
None received.
Any questions by councillors?
We've received a question from Councillor John Matheson, which is in your table papers along with the response.
Thank you very much. And item 7 are matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees. Councillor Wellham, would you like to speak to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Item 7, which is the General Fund and 4-year outlook. Overview and Scrutiny generally welcomed the additional £500,000 allocated to climate change for the year 2021, and you'll have seen the comments that were made during that meeting. There are just a couple of outstanding queries there in paragraphs 20.19 to 2022, and they are around funding, whether Mid-Suffolk District Council will have to put funds into the civil parking enforcement, either as a lump sum or, more concerning, is as an ongoing expenditure. Is it going to break even in the longer term, or is there going to be a profit? What's the profit going to be used for? And are there funds allocated if they are needed? I don't know if there's an answer to that, or whether we will get a response to that, but hopefully it has been taken into account.
Yes, thank you. Good questions. I'm not sure the precise details of how much this may or may not be a money-making scheme are known yet. I think it's designed to be revenue neutral. But in terms of the details of what happens to the money, my understanding is it gets returned to the County Council, but perhaps if I could ask Cass to clarify, in full. Thank you, Cass.
Please come in, yes.
Hello. So in terms of off-street, which are the council car parks, any revenue, so from the car park tariffs or from the tickets that are issued for enforcement, that income comes back into Mid Suffolk District Council, and that will help pay for the whole parking function. So of course we're having a combination of Ipswich and West doing that function on our behalf. So initially that goes to pay for it. I believe that there will be a deficit. So currently we run at a deficit, and I absolutely assume that that's going to continue for a while at least, while there are small parking charges available in a small amount of income being made by the council on parking, which is used to subsidise the service. So that is likely to run at a subsidy. In terms of on street, so that is the county council's function, they have decided to devolve across Suffolk to local authorities. Again, that function is being done by Ipswich and West Suffolk, so any income generated by those enforcement tickets will go back to the county council, will pay for the parking function, and then they will choose to do what they will with any surplus from that.
Could I just ask one more question? You said the county will do what they will, but I think that has to be traffic and transport related. It can't be just build a new school or buy a new book or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. The outputs one from joint overview and scrutiny, we are taking actually at the point on the agenda where that will be relevant. Thank you. Item 8, the forthcoming... Sorry, we missed that one. HRA, sorry, Keith.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the HR account budget and 4-year outlook. Committee were generally satisfied with the HRA budget, but at some time, not necessarily today, committee would like to see a timescale for the new house building. There is a programme of building council houses, and we would like to see when that's going to be taking place, what the programme is for those projects. But I'm not expecting an answer now, but would like one in due course.
Thank you. Sorry, I'll do in a moment. We've got another one there, haven't we? No, that's fine. That's fine, yeah. Do we need to take the recommendations on here?
Yeah. We do. Well, you're picking them up as part of the budget anyway, so no, you're fine.
No, yeah, okay, that's fine. Thank you. Oh no, this has gone again.
Forthcoming decision.
Sorry. The forthcoming decisions list. Does anyone have any questions there? No, thank you. We move then to the general fund budget, MCA 1943, the general fund budget for 2021 and the 4-year outlook. And I'll ask Councillor Whitehead to give us the report on that, please.
Thank you, Chairman, or Vice Chair. I brought the draft General Fund budget for 2021 to Cabinet in January, and subsequent to that, Overview and Scrutiny had the opportunity to review this draft budget at their January meeting. I'm grateful to Overview and Scrutiny for the diligence they applied to that process and the questions they raised. And details of their considerations are included in our pack today at pages 17 through 21. Now, having presented what I trust was a thorough introduction to the draft budget at our January meeting, and with this budget also having been subject to an in-depth briefing by our finance team to an all-member briefing in January, I don't intend to take up a great deal of our time today with yet another lengthy introduction, but I must advise Cabinet there have been some recent revisions to the draft budget numbers, These arise from the completion of the statutory business rates declarations, which are based on the end of January numbers and therefore included information that only became available after our previous considerations of the budget. And these changes, which are positive, i.e. good news, are set out in the tabled additional report. So just in terms of the budget, I'd just like to reinforce a small number of key observations. We've had a deliberate policy of minimising the use of New Homes bonus in balancing our budget over the last few years, and indeed none of our actual annual outturns since New Homes bonus started has taken a penny from New Homes bonus for our normal council running costs. And likewise for 2021, we use no New Homes bonus to balance the books. And paragraph 810 in our report clearly shows why this is important, because New Homes bonus will fall away to zero by year 2023-24. We also all know that central government support grants have fallen away over the last few years, and that's why we've been determined that our council can stand on its own 2 feet by generating our own income to support our expenditure. And just to recap, we do that by our various pooled investments, which give us an income stream, by building up Suffolk to 50 million in secure real estate assets with quality rental income streams. We grow our tax base through new housing, and that provides over 1% extra a year to our tax base. And then finally, through modest below inflation increases, for example this year we're proposing 1.66% to increase our council tax. That increase is £2.76 for a Band D property, which works out at just 28 pence a month extra for typical persons paying on a 10-month direct debit. And a budget for the year shows a healthy surplus, and that's even after having set aside 2 quite large sums of money, one for £1 million and one for £500,000. The £1 million we're setting aside to a commercial development risk and management reserve, and that's for our in-district developments of brownfield and greenfield sites. That covers middle school sites, the Needham Market headquarter site, and our large Gateway 14 site. These sort of developments are never risk-free, and so it's just best to have this extra contingency whilst we have a surplus in hand. £500,000 we're putting into climate change initiatives. Interesting ideas emerged from several meetings we had with opposition groups. Some of these have been passed across to Climate Change Task and Finish Group for scoping and refining. And in the meantime, several of our officers have also put in considerable work examining these proposals. That work is ongoing, but it's crystal clear to me that real action on climate change will need real money set aside, and accordingly we've put £500,000 aside as the starter in 2021, and more may come forward from the Growth Efficiency Fund going forward. More details of those initiatives will be set out in the Corporate Outputs report we'll be speaking with later. We are spending quite a bit of our earmarked reserves during next year, but reserves in total should still be over £10 million by the end of 2021, as set out in paragraph 7.6. And giving you that figure, I'm actually ignoring SIL because that's special and ring-fenced. But it's great to have such a healthy cushion as we go forward, as that lets us invest in our leisure facilities, business development, and all the various emerging environmental initiatives. The budget report also covers capital, and all the detail of that is in Appendix B. £14.9 million we intend to spend, which includes the balance of Sifco, Needham Market Lakes Visitor Centre, Cafe, and Leisure Centre developments. Cabinet will also note in the proposed change to reduce the 25% discount for unoccupied and unfurnished residential dwellings from 3 months down to 28 days. That brings in more council tax, acts as an incentive not to keep properties vacant, whilst giving landlords time to re-let their properties. Now, following concerns raised by various members, I can confirm that empty properties arising through the death of residents and the granting of probate are subject to a different policy regime. And lastly, added into this report since it last came to Cabinet is Section 12, Pay Policy Statement, which starts on page 56. Now, in previous years, this has been brought forward as a separate report, but I understand that many councils now incorporate it into their budget reporting, and it strikes me as a sensible thing to do. And as always, I'm happy to answer any questions on the report. The finance team are here to assist me, as there's obviously a great deal of detail within this report. But firstly, though, I'd like to propose a full suite of recommendations set out in the report at section 3, plus the tabled update paper, and ask for someone to second that. Thank you.
A seconder, please. Thank you.
I'm delighted to second the report and the recommendations. I think it finds the ideal balance between risk and opportunity and should satisfy both the cautious and the progressive. And I think it sets the council on a good course. Thank you.
Very much. And are there any questions for the Cabinet Member or officers? Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I understood that the final finance settlement was made on the 6th of February, so just a few days ago, and I just wondered what the impact of that was on the budget, if any. Secondly, the Cabinet Member for Finance refers to the new homes bonus being in its last year, and then I think you used the expression it would fall away. However, government's already said that it wants to consult on a new replacement incentive to replace the new homes bonus. So the expectation is that there will be something to replace it, and it won't be zero. I'd like to thank the administration for liaising with us on our budget proposals, and I'm very pleased to see some of those being taken forward. There's a couple that I would still have wished to see more work be done on, which included improving our sustainability in our own house building and promoting electric vehicles. And Councillor Matheson's question, I mean, I think we should be ashamed that we've only got 2 EV charging points in mid-Suffolk. That really is very, very poor. And we did put forward some proposals to improve that and have more EV charging points. And thirdly, I visit Stowmarket, but I think more people should. And we did put some proposals forward about attracting more people to Stowmarket. And the visioning work that's been going on there, in our view, has been taking quite a long time. And we would like to see that progressing far faster. And I wouldn't in any way put any of these initiatives as being aggressive. I think we could do a lot more at this council. Specific questions, other than whether the finance settlement from the 6th of February has changed. I've still got a concern about car park income and in relation to the civil parking enforcement, because we retain about £600,000 of income according to the budget book, so I wouldn't want all that to slip away, but perhaps someone could answer that. Secondly, the outcomes. All we've seen about the corporate plan is corporate outputs. We haven't actually seen any outcomes. And so how are they being costed, and what would happen if they need extra funding? Is that covered? We have got 9.2 million, which is a huge sum in the growth and efficiency fund, as it were. And I'm concerned that the amount that we've put forward in reserves for neighbourhood plans is very low, given that we should really be supporting them. And once we get our joint local plan more underway, those neighbourhood plans will be needing to be reviewed, and we should be supporting those communities with that. And I'd like to see more funding put forward for that. So specific questions are car park income, whether the outcomes for corporate outputs are being covered, and if we're sure that we've got sufficient funding there for neighbourhood plans. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
So if I could just refer to Catherine for the information on the final settlement.
Yes, no change. The figures were exactly as in the provisional settlement.
So just to address some of the other issues that Councillor Eburn raised. Yes, the new homes bonus, I mean, we've seen how the government tinker with it, and it is going down to zero, and we know something is coming through to replace it, but as of yet, we have no clue what that might be. We do know that in any settlements going forward, counties and unitaries seem to be being favoured over districts, and also any new scheme could just be of a temporary nature. So it's just best to try and make sure we can do what we can do day to day without having recourse to that. The table of papers that before you show a cumulative surplus through to the end of 2024 of 2.282 million. So there is still a lot of scope, I would say, for fine-tuning a lot of the points that you raised, whether it be neighbourhood planning expenditure or EV points, work in Stowmarket, or housing sustainability. We've got that £500,000 set aside, and we've still got a lot of growth and efficiency fund money to spend on that. So there are a lot of initiatives that do need more refining, but as Councillor Gould said, this budget is, even people like myself who like to approach things on a cautious side, there's still plenty of money there to be spent.
Councillor Eburn, I think some of the questions you tackled there, they will become more apparent within the later document for the corporate plan. If we can take those there, I think that would be more appropriate. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Field.
Thank you. I'm wondering whether there are any good questions left. I just again thank you for the opportunity to discuss some aspects of the budget, and the ones of our proposals that were adopted I think are a good choice. We're pleased to see that. Particularly perhaps my own views on enforcement, to see us taking more effective action there will be very good, and certainly meet the requirements of many of our residents. I'm a little sad to see that you didn't find it possible to support the views that Highways advice to planning meetings could do with a boost to get solutions which are more to the liking of residents and more to the benefit of the economy. But nevertheless, okay, we understand that point. On new homes bonus, I would just comment that yes, the county bias, as you well know, a county council as well, one knows the county's pretty short of cash, and the benefit of giving cash to the county is it will actually spend it. To get to a question, looking on page 49, I just had an issue about pension fund assumptions. I'm pretty sure, again, that you're thinking of the other place, they are assuming a 1% reduction per annum in pension payments. And I had a feeling that there are later papers in this set. It's easy to lose them among 260 pages, but I thought there were later pages that said something slightly different to the comments on page 49, i.e. led me to believe, once again, there was a slight reduction, as the pension fund is, I believe, pretty well funded at the moment. So I wondered if there's someone could point me in the right direction on that one.
Councillor Whitehead, please.
Thank you for that. Certainly in my 8 years on this council, Councillor Field always seems to ask good questions, and looking particularly at the pension side of it, yes, at the bottom of page 49 it says the 1% per annum reduction from 2021 through to 22-23 being built into these numbers. But perhaps Catherine, if you want to just add any more to that?
No, I was literally going to confirm the same, that we are building in a 1% reduction for the next 3 years, so for 2021, 21-22 and 23-24, because that's the next 3 years of the next triennial valuation. So the fund position has approved, so we're taking the decision to take 1% out.
Okay, but I'm just confirming that your later analysis as the 151 officer actually says the same thing, does it? I thought he was saying something slightly different.
So I can double check that, but hopefully it does. If not, I'll correct it for the council report.
Thank you. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. there's an urgent need for more clarity around neighbourhood planning. This was brought home at the recent Development Control Committee on 22nd of January, as one or two of those within Cabinet are fully aware. This need is bound to increase as the joint local plan gets nearer to adoption. I get the feeling that currently planning policy staff are really struggling with their current workload, and this is bound to increase. The pressure is bound to increase, in my view. So shouldn't we be doing something now, not waiting?
Yeah, can do.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's fair to say that the pressure on all officers in relation to every service is going to increase over time as demand for our services increases. Neighbourhood planning is no exception to that rule. Planning generally, I think it's probably fair to say you can never have enough planners, no matter how much planning work there is. But as we sit here at this point in time, the assessment from a strategic director perspective, and more particularly from an assistant director perspective, is that we've got the right level of resource. But clearly, at any point in time, if we think we need more, then we will come back to members and seek more resource in that regard. The majority of the work, remember, of course, in relation to neighbourhood planning is done by that village or town. Our role is to support them in that regard, not to do the work for them. They are the experts in their area. But we think we've got the right level of resource at this time.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No? In that case, I have a proposer and seconder. And thank you very much. And we'll move on then to report number MCA 1944, which is the Housing Revenue Account, HRA Budget 2020 and the longer term outlook. Councillor Whitehead, please.
Yes, thank you again. I'd now like to introduce Cabinet Paper 1944, which is the Housing Revenue Account Budget for 2021 and its longer term outlook. I brought the draft HRA budget here in January, and it's subsequently been reviewed later in that month by overview and scrutiny, and their observations are set out in our pack on pages 23 through 27. There have been some minor revisions to those draft numbers as workers continue to fine-tune the figures, with the result that the deficit for the year, which we previously said would be 617,000, is now 564,000. As I said in my January introduction, there's been many positive developments and improvements commenced during this current year, arising from the fundamental review of the housing service undertaken in 1920. This has identified savings, efficiencies and income-generating opportunities to achieve a sustainable business plan for the future. Members can read those details in sections 7 and 8 of the report. From April 20, we are now allowed to increase council tax rents by Consumer Price Index plus 1%. This works out at a 2.7% increase, but that's after 4 years of government-imposed 1% annual rent reductions. So a house with a typical weekly rent of £80 before the 4 years of reductions came into force will have a weekly rent after this 2.7% increase of £78.92. So all tenants will still be paying less rent for the same property in April 20 than they were in April 15. We're maintaining garage rents at the same level as 1920. There'll be no increases there. We're proposing to increase sheltered housing service charges by £2. I know at our last meeting, Councillor Eburn raised her concerns about this increase. And as a follow-up, I've asked the finance team for more analysis to be done in this area. That's now been done, and it shows that a £2 increase goes less than halfway to eliminating the deficit. In an ideal world, there would be no deficit and no cross-subsidy from general non-sheltered tenants, and accordingly, £2 a week is the minimum amount of increase that we can recommend this year. I'm anticipating that more work can be done in this area over the course of 2021 to see what cost savings may be achievable to minimise future increases of these charges. Following utility cost increases, we are proposing to increase sheltered housing by 5% or 62 pence per week. These are all set out in the report recommendations. The HRA budget includes a marked increase in our new build and acquisition programme, the capital costs set out in Appendix A. In the next 4 years, 44 million will be spent, of which 3/4 of that sum is forecast to be spent in the first 2 years. That's funded by capital receipts, grants, borrowings and revenue contributions. And again, Appendix A has those details. Working with ICENI, this will equate to 185 affordable homes and 85 shared ownership homes. Major sites for development include Needham Market, Stowmarket Middle School sites. And building all these council homes must be great news for anyone struggling to find a new home locally. Borrowing levels are set out in the graph on paragraph 6.3, which shows that debt peaks at 22-23, but then falls away quite steadily, and in fact halves over 15 years. And of course, supporting all this current year's budget is a 30-year HRA business plan, which we produce on a rolling basis to ensure our HRA plans are sustainable in the longer term. Housing is a specialist area of the council, and I'm pleased to say that Gavin Fisk, our AD for Housing, my Housing and Communities Cabinet colleague, Councillor Flatman, and our finance team are here to assist me in any questions that might arise in this report. But first, I'd like to move the recommendations set out in paragraph 3, plus the updated tables, and I'd like to ask my colleague, Councillor Flatman, if she's prepared to second them. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very happy to second this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, please? Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Whitehead, for following up on that, on my previous question. Although then that's another question for me as to whether that means next year we'll be doing another £2 a week increase, but I'll leave that one there for the moment. But my question really would be, what are we actually doing for our sheltered tenants to ensure that their bills are as low as possible? And that's in the widest sense of that, in terms of actual heating systems, as well as whether their homes are fully well insulated and have PV on the roof and so on. And my second question, if I may, is with regards to PV across the housing stock. I'm just interested to know if we've actually achieved the maximum, as it were, in terms of the homes that have got photovoltaic panels on them, and whether there are other opportunities, whether they be on garage roofs or on, above other stock, that buildings that the council owns. So are we actually maximising the opportunities from PV? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead is putting his hand up, sir.
I'll kick off with this. Certainly, when looking at the costs of sheltered housing, it certainly is an expensive process. There's no doubt about that. But we will do an in-depth look at our costs there. Perhaps Gavin might like to just say a few words on terms of the sort of cost drivers, etc.
Flatman, did you wish to come in, or
Gavin?
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to Councillor Eburn's question, there are a number of planned large-scale capital improvement programmes on some of our larger sheltered housing schemes this year to upgrade and provide more energy efficient and low-cost communal heating systems using air source technology of the alike, and I think we're actually out to contract on 2 schemes at the moment. Coming back to the wider question, obviously the sheltered housing service is only one part of the overall housing service. We are continually always actively looking at the cost drivers for those services and how we can reduce those costs, which in turn obviously maximise the amount of income we receive from council tenants' rents. And I think within the corporate outcomes and the home strategy, we've talked about a wider review of sheltered housing in the forthcoming months and year to consider what is sheltered housing in its more wider context, because we know we've got an ageing population, but we also know that some of our sheltered housing isn't of a high demand. So what are the challenges there in terms of providing the best possible accommodation for older people? So I fully expect that review to start later this year.
Thank you.
And just to come back on the second point Councillor Eburn raised regarding the PV panels, going back to when these were first introduced and before our present AD for Housing took on the post, I did notice that there were some, for example, maisonettes in my area where they looked perfect for PV panels, but because of the complications of sharing the electricity generated between various tenants rather than just being one house, the decision at that time was taken not to put panels on the roof. Of course, now the present anything put in now would have a different tariff to what was there several years ago. But I think what's been more important has been to get the system up and running properly. There's been quite a lot of concerns, a lot of perhaps late revenues and a lot of maintenance and repair issues that had to be sorted out first before I think we perhaps now may be able to turn our attention to seeing if there are any other extras going forward.
Councillor Field.
Just one point. Obviously on sheltered housing, the alternatives to sheltered housing, like care homes, are cost you more per week than shelter housing costs per month. So just a thought. A question really about the capital spend and our future ambitions. We seem to have a programme here that lasts until 22-23. It would seem obviously that we do get a return from our investment, and that you might take a view that continuing to invest that return so that you steadily increase the housing stock or possibly replace the stock that is obsolete, is that the right word, that requires replacing to meet modern environmental standards, might be a more far-sighted view. Is there any intention to see these programmes continue and form a continuous, perhaps 30-year investment process?
Gavin, can you come in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Field's correct in that it does look like the capital programme in relation to potentially new builds and acquisitions starts to tail off after 22-23. We are doing a lot of work with our HRA business plan consultants as to what the HRA can afford in the longer term over the next 30 years. Obviously, any new debt has to be paid for. We'll be working with the Cabinet and with the portfolio holder to understand what that is and what that means in terms of the level of our ambition in terms of our new homes programme. So that will be taking place over the forthcoming months, and within the corporate outputs and outcomes, there is the plan to review the HRA business plan in its entirety this year. So that I would expect to support conversations in relation to the organisation's plan to deliver new homes in the future.
Thank you. Can I just point out your paragraph 5.6 seems to indicate this is a good thing to continue to do.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. In that case, I have a proposer and a seconder, and I'll ask for a show of hands, please. All those in favour? Thank you. So, sorry. Move on then to the Councillor Whitehead show still, with Joint Capital Investment and Treasury Management Strategies 2020 to 2021. Thank you, John.
Okay, continuing my show. Thank you. Third report I'm introducing today is the Joint Capital Investment and Treasury Management Strategies 2021. That's report 1945, which starts on page 113 of our pack. This paper will be presented to full council at the end of February and has already been subject to full scrutiny by a joint audit and standards committee. This is a joint paper as the strategies cover both Baber and Mid Suffolk. And indeed, all the many tables within the report show the details for both Baber and Mid Suffolk. This report is produced annually and there have been no significant changes in format this year. But of course, all the data contained in the report has been updated to reflect latest capital expenditure, investment and borrowing, and the latest Treasury management, investment and borrowing positions of the Council. The information required is set out in the SIP for Treasury Management Code of Practice and the Prudential Code, both of which were published in 2017, along with the MHCLG Investment Guidance, which was published in 2018. Now, in this introduction, I could spend considerable time talking you through all the various appendices within the 59 pages of this report, but I am conscious that we do have a very extensive Cabinet agenda before us today, so instead it may be more timely just to open the report up for questions. As I said earlier, this report has also been scrutinised already by the Joint Audit and Standards Committee. So I'll propose now the list of recommendations set out in section 3, plus the updated tabled adjustments, on pages 113 and 114 of the report. And particularly, I'd like to draw the attention of members to recommendation 3.8, which is new for this year and arises from the Joint Audit and Standards Committee scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Proposal there from Councillor Whitehead, because I'm willing to second it if there was. No?
Yes, sorry. Have you made the recommendation? Sorry.
Councillor Burns just volunteered to second it.
He's seconded. Thank you. And are there any questions then?
Thank you, Chair. If there's nobody else, I'm confused. I forgot the wrong version of the papers, but on page 140, there are two tables there. Table 4, and on my version, there's no numbers in the table. How can we see what the total investment exposure is if we haven't got any numbers in the table?
Who's read the papers?
And Chair, my second question was, have Cabinet read the papers?
Seems not.
I assume we have no exposure.
Well, yeah, it would be no investment equals no exposure. Yeah, good idea. But I think we have got some significant exposure.
We're just trying to find a version of the report that's got the numbers in. I'm assuming the numbers would have been in the report that went to Joint Audit and Standards, so I'm not quite sure how they've ended up as blank, but we'll just see if we can find the correct version. Not quite sure how Cabinet would wish to handle this. I've now got a version with the numbers in. I could read them out, or we could circulate them, and we'll make sure they're in the final version for the council papers. So happy to do either way.
Can you read them out, please, Catherine?
I'll only do Mid Suffolk's unless anybody particularly wants to hear Babers. So for Mid Suffolk, starting with 2018-19, the number for the Treasury Management investments is 12.3, and the capital investments 30. So that gives a total exposure of 42.3. 2019-20, so that was actual, that figure. Forecast for 19-20 for the current year. Treasury management investments 13.68. Capital investments 45.7. Total exposure 59.38. 2021 Treasury management investments 13.17. Capital investments 59.29. Total 72.46. 21-22 Treasury management investments 13.09. Capital investments 64.11. Total exposure 77.2. 22-23 Treasury management investments 13.03. Capital investments 64.11. Total exposure 77.14. And finally 23-24 Treasury management investments 13.01. Capital investments 64.11. Total exposure 77.12. And apparently those figures were in the report that went to joint audit and standards, so I'm not quite sure what's happened in just pulling this report together.
Chair, for the avoidance of doubt, they are millions of pounds. They're not percentages. It doesn't matter. We do need to know what the units are, but they are millions of pounds risk that we are exposed to, I believe.
Assets and investments didn't have any comment with that, or?
A large part of the figures you're talking about there is the investment in Gateway 14, which obviously is a significant investment for the council. So that's a large part of what that is.
Okay. Drawing a blank. I mean, if assets and investments have considered them okay, I don't see. Obviously, it hasn't come to our members here, but until Catherine just gave us those figures. And obviously, with Gateway 14, we are going to have some large expenditure. Are there any other questions? No. No? Well, yes. Councillor Field.
Just looking at table 6 on page 141. This is noticing the difference between the rate of return on Treasury management investments, which, depending on what year you pick, 1920 is 3.04% against CIFCO 2 at 1.58%. And then it varies. It seems to vary quite considerably as the years progress. Gateway 14 Limited indeed gives a higher investment return than anything. I was just wondering, if you like, why are we doing CIFCO 2 if Treasury management investments give you a higher rate of return? What am I missing?
Councillor Whitehead, please.
I believe that the CIFCO 2 reduction will be based on the fact that borrowing costs will have gone up compared to the borrowing costs we incurred on CIFCO 1. Gateway 14 at the moment is just the return on the monies lent by the council to the Gateway 14 company whilst it undertakes the development. So the actual real return and profit on that will be a lot longer to ultimately finalise, but that it really is just a turn on the money lent there at the moment. And the various treasury management investments are of different sort of compared to Sifco, it's basically blending risk and investment between investment funds and, for example, the real estate. The whole point of investing across various asset streams is to spread the risk and return.
Are there any other questions? If not, we'll take it to a vote. We have a proposer and seconder. All those in favour? Thank you. Sorry. We'll move on to MCA 1946, which is the business rates discounts policy. And I'll ask Councillor Whitehead to come back in.
Thank you. I'm pleased now to introduce my fourth and final report as agenda item 12, which is report MCA 1946 on business rates discounts policy. The government recently announced in the Queen's speech in December further changes to business rate discounts. As these are temporary by nature, the government has not enacted primary legislation, but instead is relying on local authorities using their existing discretionary relief powers. The discount changes proposed are to increase the retail discount from 1/3 to 1/2, to add in cinemas and music venues to the scheme, and to extend the duration of newspaper discounts, and also to introduce an additional discount for pubs. I understand that there are 44 pubs in Mid-Suffolk that will be covered by this new discount scheme, which allows up to a £1,000 discount per pub, which would equate in total to 44,000. A key point for members to understand is that this relief to local businesses will be fully reimbursed by central government. So our local businesses benefit from the business rate reductions, but this comes at no cost to ourselves as a local authority. Now, the business rate bills for 2021 are due to be sent out in early March, and from both an administrative point of view and also for those receiving their bills, it must surely be preferable for those bills to reflect these new discounts. Now, time is very tight to process all these changes, but I know the staff at our Shared Revenues Partnership will relish such a challenge. Further details of the application of various discounts have emerged since the report was written, and the recommendation in section 3.1 delegates authority to our Assistant Director for Corporate Resources, in consultation with both myself and our council leader, to agree and send to SRP for processing all these business rate discounts. I'm pleased to propose that recommendation. Would ask for someone to second it. As always, we stand ready to answer any questions members may have. Thank you.
I would like to second that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any questions? I actually have one, which I noticed on the Baber work that charity shops didn't qualify, they weren't considered to qualify for this discount, whereas in our own paper they do. I'm just wondering if there is any benefit out of the way that Baber are doing theirs. I think charity shops already get a substantial release from the business rates. I don't know what your thoughts might be on that, Councillor.
There's a whole scheme of applications for various discounts, which Andrew from SRP is here, and he can advise us on that, particularly in terms of the charity shops, which I believe get an 80% mandatory and a 20% discretionary discount for Mid-Suffolk. But Andrew, if you perhaps just talk through how the various discounts apply and the complications you have to work through.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Whitehead is correct. The charity shops will receive a mandatory relief of 20%, and when we do top them up, 80%, and we do top them up with 20% discretionary relief. which is slightly different to how Labour deal with their relief. In applying the retail relief and the pub relief, there is a pecking order, so you have to do all the mandatory reliefs first, followed by the discretion ones, the pub relief being the very last discount we award. So there is that discrepancy between the two authorities.
So it diminishes in theory as you go along, am I right? Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 2019 to 23 to support delivery of the joint corporate plan. And I'll ask Councillor Morley, please, to...
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the key outputs proposed for 2019 to 23. These outputs support the delivery of the 6 strategic priorities in the joint corporate plan agreed by Mid-Suffolk Council in October. Each of the 6 priorities are supported by their own strategies, with the environment strategy currently under development and being influenced by the member task force, and the wellbeing strategy scheduled for development in the coming months. We will also be refreshing our economic development strategy. These strategies will set out the key outcomes under each strategic theme and will be underpinned by detailed action plans. Corporate performance indicators are currently being revised for 2020 to 2021 onwards to align with the new corporate plan. We want to emphasise that the outputs identified at this stage are not exhaustive, and we fully expect to add to these over the next few years. Indeed, following further discussions within the Cabinet and also discussions with our Green Group and our Liberal Democrat Group, I would like to add 5 additional outputs to the recommendations as in the papers tabled today. In the main, these build on work that has already started but need further development. And these are to promote sustainable new homes across the district by increasing available advice, address fuel poverty while improving energy efficiency and reducing carbon, improve tree cover across the district, improve democratic engagement with residents, and review and improve planning enforcement. I'm really pleased that our Green and Lib Dem groups are so aligned with our administration's thinking on these things. In order to achieve these strategic outcomes, we know how important it is to have the right resources in place. Where required, following preparation of business cases, bids will be submitted to the Growth and Efficiency Fund and to the proposed climate change earmarked reserve to support activities related to the environment. Monitoring and reporting on the delivery of the corporate plan's outputs will take place in a number of ways, including through the quarterly performance reports to Cabinet. Finally, we recognise the importance of all member engagement in the corporate plan and outputs, and support the recommendation from overview and scrutiny in this regard. An all-member briefing session will take place in March this year to provide an opportunity for members to gain a greater overall understanding of the 6 strategic priorities in the corporate plan. Thereafter, throughout the year, all member briefing sessions will be themed to cover 1 strategic priority each. Work is underway to ensure that as many member development and engagement sessions as possible will be accessible remotely through a range of methods. The same is being considered more generally for the rollout of the joint corporate plan. I move the recommendation to agree the outputs for 2019 to 23 set out at Appendix 1 of the main report, and also the 5 additional outputs listed at paragraph 1.2 of the addendum report tabled today. I also move the recommendation to agree that the environmental outputs relevant to the parameters of the Climate Change Task Force are referred to that group. Thank you, Chair, and I would ask for a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that, Madam Chair. Madam Leader. And do we have any questions? Councillor Wellham, sorry. Oh yes, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Wellham, you're going to comment on your overview and scrutiny on you.
Thank you, Chair. There was much debate at overview and scrutiny. Generally, Mid Suffolk members wished for more details and Baber members were unconcerned. In fact, Baber were not clear as to whether or not they actually wanted it to be a joint meeting or whether they were quite happy for Mid Suffolk to look at the outputs brochure document, whatever we call it. None of the members there could really understand the real value of the corporate outputs paper since it contained few measurable outputs, and it would not be possible to measure its performance against the actions listed in the booklet of outputs. So the resolution from the Joint Committee was that the committee urges Cabinet to find a range of methods to engage with all members to understand the linkage between the corporate plan and the corporate outputs and explain the role of member working groups in developing strategies and action plans. And I think some of that the leader addressed in her introduction. But I think it is important that members do become involved, and to become involved they need the opportunities to become involved, because this is potentially a very important document, but without any dates against the outputs and without measurable outputs, it is of limited use.
Thank you very much. Did you wish to?
You say this is a potentially important document. There's no doubt in my mind whatsoever. This is a very important document, and we are looking at many ways, different ways to engage with our members, as I stated in my introduction, and these include a range of measures, including webcasting and remote access, and we'll be investigating those throughout the coming months.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Eburn?
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank the leader and the portfolio holder for finance for the discussions that we had that Councillor Field and myself initiated back in November when we approached the administration with our draft budget proposals, and I appreciate the discussions that we've had both in relation to the budget and the corporate plan in that regard. Obviously, we're pleased to see the things that are coming forward, but then again disappointed of the things that aren't coming forward. So, but that's probably a conversation for another day, I think. But although specifically, I am disappointed that we're not going further with regards to our own housing developments and ensuring things that housing is far more environmentally efficient, and we're able to actually enable that tenants living in our own housing stock have really low bills, and so therefore they're at less risk of rent arrears, and they're more able to go out and get particular types of employment because they're less worried about their bills and so on and so forth, and health benefits if you're in a healthy house, and so on. So I think we should be really far more ambitious there, and I think there's a will here, shown by the seminar that Councillor Matheson arranged on Friday afternoon when there was standing room only when looking at kind of new methods of house building. So I would like to see far more ambition from the council in that regard. And other ones, I really think, you know, one EV charging point in Stowmarket, as I've mentioned, I think that really is pretty poor, and we should be doing a lot more there. But there's more I could go into detail there. But specific questions, I think I'm concerned that we've got this document that's got corporate outputs, and obviously what we need to have is outcomes, and we need to have outcomes that are actually measurable for residents and for our district. But the new financial year starts in 6 weeks' time. So I haven't, you know, I'm assuming that you guys here in the Cabinet will have seen documents saying what the corporate, you know, say draft comes with measurable items on those. But, you know, if we're going to start measuring this from 5th of April, we need to, you know, something should be here. I mean, if not at this Cabinet meeting, then I'd hope that you've got something coming to your March one. So my question is what's, you know, what are the corporate outcomes? Then the question that I was asking in the budget session, have we got the funding that, if needs be, you know, in terms of delivering those outcomes, are we confident that we've got the funding to you know, attach those? And I think the answer is going to be yes from the Growth and Efficiency Fund, but just to confirm that, please. Thank you very much.
I'll ask the Chief Executive, please, to answer to that.
If I can just pick up part of that, I possibly won't answer all the question, but I'll try to. So I'm hopeful that this is the first and last time you ever receive a list of corporate outputs. They're very deliberately phrased outputs because there's no point trying to kid ourselves that these are outcomes, and so they're very clearly phrased in that way. The outcomes that I believe all councillors would wish to seek should be already enshrined within your 6 key strategic priorities, and particularly within the 6 key strategies in that regard. I say 6, and you will appreciate, members, that I've said before about the fact that 2 of those 6 are works in progress and in fact appear on the list of outputs in terms of activity that needs to happen, those in particular being the environment strategy and the wellbeing strategy, or rather turning the sport and leisure strategy into a wellbeing strategy. So those outcomes should be enshrined within there. But as you will also have heard me say previously, that where those strategies either cease to be effective, then we should be revisiting those, and that's not to revisit the outcomes per se, but it is to revisit the tactics that go alongside delivery against those outcomes. So when I say this is the first and last time you receive it like this, our anticipation is that you will begin to receive this type of content, but as action plans with measurable outcomes alongside them as part of each of those strategies, so that you end up with a suite of 6 action plans, and probably more usefully for all members is to compile that into one document, but effectively a suite of 6 action plans that aligns to your 6 priorities, each of which is supported by 6 strategies. So you can start to see how that picture builds up. I would just take issue with one component. There are dates within this list of outputs. So if there's any concern that there are missing dates, I wouldn't say that there are dates for all of them, that some of them are more developed than others, and where they are, then they're very clear. They haven't put dates in terms of the 31st or the 1st of the month, but they are linked, as you'll see, to seasons at the moment, but those dates are there. But as the leader outlined at the outset, the intention is that alongside this, that your performance management framework is updated to make sure that you can see those measurables, and you're receiving the indicators and the confidence that the things that you want to see delivered are actually being delivered. One last observation, I suppose, is that this is a complete transformation to where you were this time last year, not least because you've had an election in between, and you've adopted a brand new corporate plan. So that's why this feels potentially slightly piecemeal, because you are transitioning from one version of how you delivered services to a different version in order to make sure that you get delivered the things that you want to get delivered. And similarly, the proposals put forward by the Green Group and the Liberal Democrat Group that weren't formally mentioned by the leader, the reason they haven't been added is because I believe the leader's view, well, she can speak for herself, usually, is that they're already in there, that those are already enshrined. So it's not that they've been left out because they're not deemed to be important. They are deemed to be important. It's just they're already in there. So you'll see reference, for example, within the outputs to policies in relation to electric charging vehicle points for exactly that reason. I just wanted to be clear for the Cabinet and for all members that those haven't been missed, so to speak.
Thank you. Yes.
If I may, Chair, may I come back? Yes, policy is lovely, but I like to see action on the ground. But thank you for that. Two points really. I think that the leader mentioned member engagement, as did the chair of overview and scrutiny. And I think one thing that sometimes gets forgotten is there's 34 councillors in this authority, and we all want to see things, we all want to contribute, and we're not, we're here to kind of improve the lives of people in this district and do what we can for that. And so please don't, please involve all members in terms of how this is progressing, because we've all got experience, we've all got our own wards, that we've got various things happening, and we've all got contributions to make. And secondly, I'd like to see more in terms of social return on investment. We talk about, what's this buzzword, the buzz phrase, invest to save, but actually we should be...
Is the question, Councillor Eburn?
Yes,
Sorry.
we should be looking at what our social return on investment is, and I'd like to know how we're using that. Are we using that across the board? Or I've only ever seen it used on one little project, so how we're showing what our or how we're going to show what our social return on investment is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Please, Chief Executive.
Just on the latter point, social value is the expression that we tend to bounce around, only because the bit of legislation calls it social value. And just to give some reassurance again, so that is an area in which I would say the councils have done some things in the past, and you can point to some examples, particularly around commissioning and procurement at times, but I would say that it's an area that's as yet not yet been fully exploited. I would agree entirely with that. And with that in mind, there is a specific project that the Assistant Director for Communities is leading in conjunction with the finance team, in particular around commissioning and procurement, but not restricted to commissioning and procurement. And indeed, Tom Barker and myself are both going down to visit the Cabinet Office and the DCMS in the next couple of months to talk about the work that they've been doing, particularly around social value and how we can bring that back and make sure that we get our maximum impact. Because ultimately, when you boil down everything that we're doing, it is ultimately about social value.
Thank you very much. Councillor Field.
A couple of simple questions. Looking at the page that says MTFP assets and investment outputs, I just wondered what the line reduction of overheads, pounds 450 throughout the year, was referring to. Maybe it's a dramatic sum, but it doesn't sound too much like it. And the one line below that says Phase 1, Customer Programme of Efficiencies Achieved, brackets spring. It's not far off the spring now. I just wondered, is that a major programme of efficiencies? And if so, spring seems pretty quick to do it. Page, it doesn't have a page number.
On
which
the left-hand side.
Oh, it does, it does. 212.
Catherine, did you wish to comment on the overheads?
I think they are numbers that were built into the budget that was approved for the current financial year, but I would just need to go back and see the elements. Obviously, there's probably a K missing behind the 450. So, yeah, I think we might have achieved £450, but yeah, I think they were things that were already built into the budget that we set for this year. Obviously, they would happen at different times during the year.
That's Catherine.
Just as part of the, there is a customer programme currently being currently being developed, and that is looking at the next stage of digital. It's looking at a reduction in use of paper, reduction in the use of printing. It's about the greater, improving our web access. So it is that whole digital web and also more paperless agenda. It's about improving and offering different ways for the customers to access us. That will bring efficiencies and hopefully will also respond to the desires of our community in order to communicate with us in different ways.
Thank you. Does that mean spring next year or spring this year?
Well, spring goes on to the end of May.
If I can assist, the previous page, 211, sets out a bit more of the detail.
Okay, are there any other questions? No? So we have a proposer and seconder. I'll take a vote, please. All those in favour? Thank you. Sorry, I don't know. MCA 1948, Suffolk Football Club. And I'll ask Councillor Gould, please, to tell us about this.
Thank you, Councillor Brister. I'm very pleased to present this report, which seeks to support the Stowmarket Sports and Social Community Interest Company, which, for the sake of us all, I'll refer to as the CIC from now on. And the CIC incorporates the Stowmarket Football Club, and we're intending to provide that support by securing a long-term lease for their premises. The report recommends a new 50-year lease to be granted from the council to the CIC, which will enable the football club to apply for FA funding to improve the ground and facilities. And the CIC are happy to progress on this basis. The council owns just under 3 acres of land which forms part of the CIC grounds. The larger part of the ground, just over 8 acres, is owned by the Stowmarket Church Charity, which I'll refer to as the church here on. The council has a lease from the church for this part, which enables the CIC to use the land. This lease expires in 2025, and the council pays the church £15,000 a year for the lease. There's no formal lease between the council and the CIC. The council receives £4,000 a year from the CIC, so the net cost to the council per annum is therefore £11,000. The council's been in discussion with the CIC with the objective of bringing certainty of occupancy for the football club while ensuring that the council's long-term interests are served. The council and the football club have agreed an approach in relation to the council-owned land, but terms are yet to be agreed with the church in respect of their land, which is needed to fully secure the site's future. So, this report proposes that the council grants a new 50-year lease to the CIC with a repairing obligation at a peppercorn rent. The council would retain control of the land through the lease. And at this point, I'll just bring to your attention, if I may, a correction that needs to be made in one of the appended diagrams, which I think it's the second of the diagram, which at the top states that the land to be gifted. This is incorrect. It is to be leased, as the report says. The council will propose that the council continue the existing lease with the church and enter into a sublease with the CIC until the current lease expires in 2025. This would enable a reversionary lease to be entered into between the church and the CIC simultaneous to the sublease. And this would secure the required land for a further 45 years. it's recommended that the Council approve the grant of the church land from the Council to the CIC, which is coterminous with the head lease at an annual rent of £4,000. Now, there is a tabled paper before you, which adds an additional recommendation. And the purpose of this recommendation is to help achieve agreement between all three parties. And the recommendation proposes, in the event that agreement is not reached in respect of a new sublease and reversionary lease with the church, that the Assistant Director for Assets and Investments, in combination with myself as Cabinet Member, be authorised to agree an alternative transaction structure in respect of the church land, subject to a maximum cost of £55,000. And that paper, as I say, is tabled. To be clear, I'll just read that out, if I may. So that in the event that option 3A is not achievable due to the lack of agreement with the Stowmarket Church Charities, the AD for Assets and Investments, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Assets and Investments, is authorised to agree an alternative transaction structure in respect of the Stowmarket Church Charities owned land, subject to a maximum financial cost of £55,000. So this amended recommendation, or additional recommendation, reiterates our support for the CIC in their quest to achieve Football Association funding, which does require commitments to all parties by the end of February. This is a great opportunity to support the CIC in its long-term aspirations and work together with the Council for the benefits of the community. And I'm delighted to say that there are representatives of the Stowmarket Football Club here with us this afternoon. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? And this is for the recommendations of 3 and 3A, and we're looking at the 3.4 as well. Mm-hmm. And just for clarity, I believe that 3.4 reduces the 11,000 a year over the 5-year period.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I would be delighted to second this proposal.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on this? Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's good to see this coming forward. I know there's been discussions with Stowmarket Football Club for however many years trying to sort out these issues. So finally, but I'm slightly concerned that in 4.7 it says they needed to do their decision in March, which is next month. So the time frame is really short. So I just wanted confirmation that the football club and the church charity as well are able to kind of resolve these further, assuming this gets approved today, that they're able to resolve the issues around that within that time frame. And secondly, if I may, Chair, we know that there's a need in Stowmarket for better footballing better kind of grounds and kind of facilities, sorry, that's the word I'm looking for, better footballing facilities in general. And in fact, everyone's jealous of the Needham Market 3G pitch and cafe and so on and so forth. So, and I just would like confirmation, if I may, Chair, on whether there are discussions between the football club, Church, Mid-Suffolk, and with the leisure centre about improving footballing facilities in general across Stowmarket. Obviously, this will lead on if they get the FA funding to better facilities, but how that will work with in Stowmarket overall. Thank you very much, Chair.
I can confirm that we are working with the Suffolk FA as well for their headquarters site and so on. So that we are working with Suffolk FA aside to this to ensure their headquarters and a 3G pitch happen in Stowmarket. Yeah. Emily, can I just confirm that we are actually working with the football club and the church charities to try and get that through in the month.
Hi. Yes, we are working with the church and with the football club. There are three parties in this discussion, so obviously it's important today that we agree the proposed lease on the council-owned land. It isn't within my control to agree on behalf of the church or indeed the CIC, but that's certainly our aspiration, is to achieve an agreement within that timescale.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Wellham.
Chair, first can I declare an interest that in 1953 I became a supporters club member of Stowmarket Town Football Club. Unfortunately that lapsed after about 15 years when Ipswich got into the Division 1. So it's important that we ensure that the club have a 50-year lease for all of the land, and I think that is what is planned. My question is, can we be assured that it is proposed that there will be a 50-year lease with no break clause or renegotiation of rent? Because if it gets, I mean, they need to have 50 years of security on land that they can afford to lease.
Emily?
Yes, within the report it states that the lease from the council will be a 50-year lease at a peppercorn, and that the football club will have repairing responsibilities during that term. So that's the basis that we've negotiated in effect.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. I would like just to congratulate the Stowmarket Football Club on the position in the league they're in at the moment, and wish them very well for the future. So that's good. I have a proposer and a seconder. I'll take a vote with a show of hands, please. All those in favour? And that's unanimous again. Thank you very much. Thank you. Move on now to MCA 1949, which is the Joint Area Parking Management Plan. Councillor Fleming, can I ask you to speak, please?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll give a brief introduction to the area management plan for civil parking enforcement, and then the paper is fairly explanatory that everyone's had a look at. The transfer of civil parking enforcement for all Suffolk local authorities from the police will commence on the 6th of April 2020, following legislation laid before Parliament in January this year. As part of the introduction of this new legislation, district councils are required to set out their own policies around parking. Suffolk County Council has adopted a high-level Suffolk parking management strategy. That was in November 2018, in anticipation of the transfer of enforcement powers. Each district now needs to have regard to that strategy and set out its own local parking policies and objectives. The Baber and Mid-Suffolk Joint Area Parking Management Plan has been drafted to meet these objectives. CPE has been running successfully in Ipswich since 2005. Ipswich Borough Council and the district councils have been working collaboratively with police and Suffolk County Council to plan to implement the new county-wide programme. To make best use of economy of scale, it was decided that Ipswich Borough Council and West Suffolk Council will jointly administer or enforce CPE in Mid-Suffolk and Baber. East Suffolk will administer CPE within its own boundary. The Joint Area Parking Management Plan that is in our papers contains broad parking policy statements which aim to set out what the parking plan is and what it is intended to achieve. It does not set out specific proposals for parking restrictions for any particular areas, and nor is it a blueprint to introduce paid parking above what is already in place. A draft plan was presented to Cabinet in February last year, 2019. That was followed by stakeholder consultation in February for a period of 6 weeks. The results of the public consultation have helped to form the modifications of the current area parking management plan, which is now ready for final adoption. The vision for the plan is that parking should be allowed where possible and controlled where necessary. I'm happy to answer questions if I can, and if I can't, I may defer to officers. Thank you.
Very much. Do I have a seconder, please?
Yes, Chair, very happy to second the policy.
Councillor Welland, can I?
Thank you, Chair. My concern is around footpaths, footways in rural areas, particularly those in front of houses in our village built-up areas, if I can call them that. The question that I asked of the Police and Crime Commissioner was around paragraph 43 in the policy. And this was before I read this. My concern is that if there is no yellow line and the footway is partially obstructed, then the police should come and enforce. If somebody's parked outside their house such that a buggy can't get through, or even a person can't walk through, we have instances where the gap between the wall of a property and the car is insufficient even to walk through. In those instances, who can enforce?
Sorry. Thank you.
My understanding is the civil parking enforcement officer can enforce. Is that not?
No.
Cass, would you like to explain? Police, I believe, can, but probably won't.
Thank you. Yes, it is a really tricky area, footway parking enforcement. There is a lot of grey areas as well. So where there is a restriction in place, so a traffic regulation order, TRO, there isn't a problem. The civil enforcement officers can absolutely enforce. Where there isn't a traffic regulation order, they have no powers. So the police do still hold powers to enforce in certain aspects. I'm not sure what the Police and Crime Commissioner replied to your question, but I'm of the understanding that if there is an obstruction, that the police can enforce.
Chair, that is precisely my understanding. However, it is not the answer that the Police and Crime Commissioner gave. The Police and Crime Commissioner, his answer was that he would expect the civil enforcement officer to enforce against parking where there's no yellow line, but the footway is partly blocked, but sufficiently blocked to not permit you to walk past. And if there was then a problem, which might occur, the concern is that when there is enforcement against parking in some areas where our enforcement officers can enforce, some people, knowing that the police are unlikely to enforce, will park in more dangerous spots on junctions and so on, which and we will not get the benefits of civil enforcement that we should be getting. I mean, leaving aside anything to do with finance, we ought to be able to regulate parking much better and enforce against bad parking much better. But unless there is the support from the police for enforcing where we cannot enforce, we're not going to get the advantages that we need. And I think that needs to be taken up I've got to have a question. Can somebody take that up with the police, please?
Councillor Fleming?
Yes, I would be glad to follow that up. There are, as Cass has said, some areas here that need refining, and I think that the coming year will provide an opportunity to do that, in particular the area where it's grey and the police are the obvious parties to enforce. Cass, would you like to add anything?
Sure, yes. Just to say that I would expect any civil enforcement officer who sees an obstruction that they can't deal with legally to be calling the police in that instance. Now, what reaction they get and the time it may take to come out, I'm not sure. However, I would see it as their job to take they've got some duty of ownership of that issue. So whether it's, if it's clearly a household possibly knocking on the door, what they can't do is stick a ticket on. They don't have the legislation, but they, as far as I'm concerned, they're our ambassadors for positive parking. They should be doing something, even if that's having a conversation with someone, if they're able to move that car along. And then secondly, absolutely, I agree with Councillor Fleming that we can talk to the police about what those grey areas are. And I know Councillor Fleming is part of the emerging Suffolk parking partnership. I would absolutely encourage Suffolk, who are leading on that, to include the police within that parking partnership, because clearly there's still an element for them to play within parking enforcement across Suffolk.
Thank you. I will certainly commit to doing that, and any other grey areas. I would add that our PCSOs can also issue warnings and advisories, although they cannot enforce either. The issue that you're pointing out to is who can actually give a ticket, which is a little bit different to issuing a warning or a follow-up, which I would hope in a rural area should be enough to move the offender along.
Thank you. I'll take Councillor Eburn and then Councillor Field, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. This was the question I was raising at the budget item. On paragraph 6.2, page 230, it says income from car parking fees and penalty charge notices will be used to offset the cost of the full parking function. Now, we earn a fair amount in parking fees from car parks, so we earn quite a lot of income from that. So I wouldn't want that just to. Is there a limit to how much of that is going to be spent on this? Because it says this will not cover the full cost. Well, I hope it doesn't cost more than 660,000, which is what it says in the budget book that we earn from car parking income. So is there a limit on the amount that we will be spending from car parking fees on this parking function? Thank you, Chair.
You're talking about the parking fees coming in off the present car parks, are you? 600 or? Yes. Yeah. Councillor Fleming, yes.
As far as I'm aware, there is no absolute limit, rather in terms of a number, but there is obviously a practical limit, and I think this should be somewhat cost neutral, although that remains to be seen whether it is. Can I defer to an officer to confirm that situation? Because obviously we can't have unlimited being unlimited out-of-pocket expenses for CPE.
Yeah, sorry, I was just conferring with my Assistant Director colleague from Finance there. I don't have the exact income figures in front of me. However, if I can answer more generally and perhaps take the question away. So we would expect our parking income to pay for our parking service. So clearly this is just the off-street element, not the on-street. What I'll have to do is talk to outside of this, if I can, to find out exactly what that income level is and therefore what any surplus is, if that's okay, Chair.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair. I'm just concerned that you're agreeing a policy that's not got a financial kind of limit. It's just on it. That's all. Chair, it may be that's been addressed elsewhere, but that's what I'm looking for the confirmation of. Thank you.
It is a difficult one because obviously illegal parking has caused tremendous problems, not just in the towns but also in the village areas, the parish areas, and there is, I suppose, a cost. But yeah, we don't need it to go too high. I agree with you. Did you want to come in on that, Councillor Fleming?
No, I think we need to take that away and make sure that that's addressed in a way that's sensible. The parking management plan will be reviewed. It's not set in stone forever. So, and there's this is the first plan that has been made, and as things evolve, which they will quite quickly, I'm sure there will be opportunities to update it.
Councillor Field, sorry to keep you waiting.
Not a problem to an extent. That was the question I was going to ask, just got asked. I was going to say, I'm certainly concerned that this looks completely open-ended and we don't really seem to have a grasp of where the money's coming from pay for this civil parking enforcement. I'm well aware that the county is putting in the off-street parking, the on-street parking from Ipswich and Bury St Edmunds to fund the first year of this, which is something like £800,000. That's clearly right across Suffolk, so not just for mid-Suffolk, but we have to bear in mind a number of things. One, that any good management control would have a plan, at least an intention, an understanding. Are we putting all on-street parking revenues into Ipswich's pockets and West Suffolk? Are we putting all the off-street parking revenues in as well? Is there some limit to that? And what sort of level of service do we get? Bearing in mind that it's entirely on the goodwill of the police, that it depends whether we address what may well be the main problem in rural areas, which is people, semi-rural areas, people parking on pavements, on verges and whatever. And we've quite clearly been told that that's not within the remit of the civil parking officers. So I think lots of people have been looking forward to civil parking enforcement. I certainly have been promising people at parish councils, and I know other councillors have been doing the same that are in this room now. And when asked how it will work, one speculates somewhat and says, I foresee it as all our cash from parking will disappear into this bin. That may well be wrong. We really need to know exactly where the position is, and I'll leave it at that. It was a lecture, not a question.
I suspect that it will obviously depend on just how many people are parking illegally and get caught for it. And that would, shorten the amount of money that we'll perhaps pay out, or lessen.
I could come back for a second. I certainly understand that in most places the parking fines do not cover the full revenue costs by any means, and we always could go to Ipswich and ask, and they'd probably tell us because they've been doing it for years.
We have a proposal and a seconder. A vote, please, with a show of hands. All those in favour? Thank you. And we move on to sorry, you're not hearing me, are you? MCA 1950, the leisure centre proposals, Mid-Suffolk leisure centres, and I'll ask Councillor Flatman, please, to present.
Thank you, Chair. Introduction for leisure investment proposals for Mid-Suffolk leisure centres. Today I'm seeking support from Cabinet to approve a much-needed capital investment into our Stowmarket and Stradbroke sites. During the summer of 2019, an officer and councillor panel undertook work to determine a potential capital programme for the MSLC, together with the ability to introduce a new outreach programme that meets the required outcomes of the Joint Council's leisure, sport and physical activity strategy, adopted in 2017. Our goal is to encourage people who live and work in Baber and Mid-Suffolk to lead more active lives. Keeping active has numerous benefits, not only for physical health but also for mental well-being. It can help to reduce isolation among older people, instill the importance of teamwork in children, and ease the symptoms of anxiety and depression. Health and well-being is key to improving people's quality of life, particularly for those from a disadvantaged background, people who have physical or learning disabilities, and an increasingly older population. Our council's vision is to support, encourage and inspire our communities to be more active, and this investment will help us achieve this. The recommendations in this report are 3.1, that Cabinet approves the use of 2.2 million from the Growth and Efficiency Fund, together with 200,000 from existing leisure facility capital funds to undertake the proposed development and refurbishment works. 3.2, to delegate to the Assistant Director, Environmental and Commercial Partnerships in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Communities, to undertake a process to achieve the most economical advantageous costs to enable the works to be undertaken. 1.3, recommendation to Council on the 27th of February that the 2020-21 capital programme and the joint capital, investment and treasury management strategies 2020-21 be updated to reflect the financial implications set out in this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to second the recommendations in the report.
Thank you very much. And again, do we have any questions? Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick one. This is great to see this happening, but I just wondered, when is it due back to Cabinet? At 4.7, it refers to kind of future work and that's happening, but I just wondered when it would be. Is it then expected to come back again here for approval of that work? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
No, we were hoping to just start work at the end of this because it's up in 2020, their agreement that we have with them now, and obviously we need to get going so that as soon as we can start putting this all into action and getting the new equipment in and the updates and moving that older, or it's not that old, back to Stradbroke, so Stradbroke benefits as well.
Thank you. Chair, if I may come back, in that case, may I ask the Cabinet Member if she could just report back when there's been some significant progress, just to keep members informed. Thank you, Chair.
I'm sure we will do that. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know, shall we set up one of our podcasts where they...
I'll just send an email.
Yeah. Councillor Field.
Sorry to be a little bit negative. State aid issues. I just scanning through this again, I didn't see any reference to them. Is there an issue? Because clearly you're providing facilities that a company may use to compete with other gyms, etc. in the area. So I would hope not, but are there?
Apologies there, just conferring again. As I understand from my colleague, because this is our own facility, we own the building and we're investing the money into our own building as opposed to giving it to a partner who owns the asset, that there isn't an issue with the state aid.
Any other questions? No? In that case, we have a proposer and a seconder. I'll take a show of hands for all those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Apparently we don't need to take the item 19 on the agenda because we've already gone through and no one wanted to refer to the confidential section of it, so So thank you all very much for your attendance. I'm calling this meeting to a close, and thank you for your comments and input.